Today's episode is sponsored by Christina Littleson's Arts on Air show, which goes live every Monday between 1 p.m. and 3. Listen on Pulse 98.4 FM or online at pulseonair.co.uk. Hello and welcome to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 75, 10 Lessons from How to Win Friends and Influence People, Part 1. Winning friends begins with friendliness. Dale Carnegie, unquote. The principles in this book are very simple, but I don't want to rush them, so I'm splitting them over 2 episodes. In the previous show, I said that there are no secrets to success, but Dale Carnegie's book will certainly give you a few nudges in the right direction, at least in terms of dealing with people. The classic self-help book was first published in 1936, and in 2011 it was still listed as number 19 on Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential books of all time. And by the way, the author Dale Carnegie was not related to Andrew Carnegie that I talked about in the Law of Success series, and I've often wondered that myself, so I just checked it out before I recorded this show and thought I'd let you know. They are not related. Anyway, I'm doing this wee series on the book as, although I think you can pick and choose from the advice that it offers in today's world, I do believe that it holds some strong truths and points of interest for us. Reviews online range from high praise for the words within its pages to corny rubbish. Some feel that it's a manual in manipulation, whilst others preach that it is the most useful book that they've ever read. I'll leave the decision up to you. Despite some criticism, though, sales have soared in the years since it was first published, and it's possibly now the most famous self-help book ever written. It aims to give easy-to-follow advice for building and improving positive and successful relationships with people in all areas of life. It's not necessarily a book for making friends, although it could be used in that way, but more directly it promotes good communication, kindness, and the social skills to adopt if you'd like to foster healthy and productive working relationships. I'm by no means covering all of the lessons from the book in this 2-parter, as there's a lot to it. It has sections on fundamental techniques in handling people, ways to make people like you, ways to win people to your way of thinking, and on how to change people without giving offence or arousing resentment. This is just a taster of the book, detailing 5 of the main lessons in this episode and another 5 in the next. The first principle, which I've taken from Carnegie's book, is to be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. And this is really 2 lessons, but I'll treat it as one as they are connected. The author demonstrates this with a story of how he attended a dinner party in New York where he met a botanist. Having never met one before, the author listened to him for hours, riveted by the descriptions of exotic plants and experiments. Later, the botanist remarked to the host, what an interesting conversationalist that Carnegie was. But the thing is, he had barely said anything at all. He had merely been a good, interested listener. Even the most ill-tempered person or the most violent critic will often be subdued in the presence of a patient, sympathetic listener, he says. Most of us are so concerned with what we are going to say next that we don't truly listen when someone else is speaking. Yet most people would prefer a good listener to a good talker. On the other hand, talking about yourself a lot, failing to listen to others and constantly interrupting them will make you instantly dislikable because these traits signal that you are self-centered and egotistical. Many of you have likely already learned this lesson in life, but I thought it would be a good place to start. The next principle is don't criticise, condemn, or complain, which Maybe a hard one to swallow in today's day and age when, as Ricky Gervais has pointed out recently, it is widely accepted that some people's opinions are occasionally recognised as more valuable than other people's facts. These are crazy days indeed. But Carnegie says that in terms of winning friends, that criticism is futile because it puts the person you're trying to win over on the defensive and makes them strive to justify themselves. It's important to remember, he has famously said, that when dealing with people, we are not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures of emotion who are motivated by pride and ego. I can certainly talk of the don't complain part of this, as there are certain people I see every day on social media moaning about this or that or the next thing. So many of them, in fact, that I just want to block, but politeness probably keeps me from doing so. But it's a hard-won battle with some people sometimes, as they just seem to endlessly, never-endingly moan and complain. The third principle for today's episode is to give honest and sincere appreciation. William James said the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated, and that is what Carnegie is riffing on here. We tend to take the people in our lives for granted so often that we neglect to let them know that we appreciate them. Of course, we must be careful to keep in mind the difference between appreciation and flattery, which seldom works with discerning people, as it is a shallow, selfish and insincere method. With words of true appreciation, however, we have the power to completely change another person's perception of themselves, to improve their motivation and be a driving force behind their success. When you think about it like that, when we have nothing to lose and only positive outcomes to gain, why wouldn't we offer genuine appreciation more often? His next principle is that the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Carnegie believed that arguing with another person doesn't really make much sense. If you lose the argument. If you win, the other person might resent you for having hurt their pride, so you still will not truly have won them over. 9 times out of 10, he says, the argument will only make the other person more entrenched in their stance than they were in the first place. I think this one's fairly self-explanatory. If you try to make a good impression, arguing with them is probably a bad idea. I can win an argument on any topic against any opponent. People know this and steer clear of me at parties. Often, as a sign of their great respect, they don't even invite me. Dave Barry, unquote. Carnegie postulates that instead of arguing with someone, we should admit their importance through appreciation. This may expand the other's ego so that they can become sympathetic. This is maybe the manipulation part of the criticism of this book. But to do this, he suggests that we welcome the disagreement. If the other person is raising a point we haven't considered, we can be thankful it's brought to our attention, as it might save us from making a mistake in future. He also advises that we distrust our first instinctive impression. Our natural reaction to a disagreeable situation is to become defensive. We should keep calm, though, and be careful of how we first react. Also, we should control our temper. Only negative outcomes result from a bad temper. Next, he advises that we listen first. We should give our opponents a chance to talk without interrupting and let them finish without resisting, defending, or debating. He also says to look for areas of agreement and raise those first. And be honest. Look for areas where we can admit error and apologise for our mistakes. This helps to reduce defensiveness in the other person. You can also promise to think over your opponent's ideas and study them carefully. And mean it, he says. Thank your opponents sincerely for their interest. If they're taking the time to argue with you, they're interested in the same things that you are. Lastly, he says that we should postpone action to give both sides time to think through the problem. In the meantime, Ask yourself honestly if your opponents might be right or partly right. And I've never really thought in these terms myself, I have to admit, or if I have, I haven't been aware of it. But a good wee call to action today might be that next time you find yourself in a disagreement with someone, don't respond with criticism or a negative email if it comes in as an argumentative email. Instead, sleep on it and see how much perspective you can gain by giving yourself a bit of time to think a situation over. That is a lesson that I have learned over the years. Instant reactions to things are all too often misjudged and can get us into trouble. And what I'm specifically talking about here is email. It's that email that comes in that you read quickly and it annoys you and you fire off a response. But when you take a minute to think about it and maybe reread it when your headspace is slightly different, you might find out that it's not a criticism at all. You've misjudged it. The final principle for today, though, is one that I also have tried to adopt, but that I find pretty difficult sometimes, and it's that a person's name is the sweetest sound they've ever heard. Carnegie believed that a person's name is a very powerful thing. It's an embodiment of that person's identity. It's a reference to them, so remembering and using someone's name is a great way to make that person feel important. Calling someone by their name is like paying them a very subtle compliment. Conversely, forgetting or misspelling someone's name can have the opposite effect and make it feel though we are distant and disinterested in them. Remembering, though, and using people's names is a critical component of good leadership. He believed that the executive who can't remember an employee's names can't remember a significant part of his business and is operating on quicksand. And famously, Napoleon would learn people's names. And I'll post a reference to it in the show notes. There's a great article about this. But he famously put real effort into learning the names of the people that he was commanding. But people generally don't remember names for the simple reason that they don't put in the effort. We're introduced to a stranger only to forget his or her name just a few minutes later, and I'm really terrible for this. I work hard to get round it, though, by perusing call sheets the day before I get to do the job and learning the names of the director, the key actors, and the director of photography, script supervisor, armourer, etc., even before I get on set. And the reason I do that is, as a fight guy, I tend to come on set maybe for 1 day or 2 or 3 days during a shoot. So I've got to learn 40 new names in the time that I'm in. These people have been working together for weeks and they only have to remember kind of the new guy's name. So they're pretty good at remembering my name, but I'm not so good at remembering theirs. As I say, I'll post an article about name learning in the show notes that I thought was really, really excellent. It's from rightattitudes.com. Well, I think that's enough for today. In summary, though, we had be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves. Don't criticise, condemn, or complain. Give honest and sincere appreciation. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. And a person's name is the sweetest sound they ever heard. Thanks for joining me here today and investing in yourself once again. If you have enjoyed the show, I'd be very grateful if you would take the time to leave a rating or a review perhaps on whatever app that you use to listen to your podcasts on. It makes a huge difference to the show because it bumps it up in the rankings and attracts more listeners in turn. I really appreciate also the time that you give here, whether you're a long-time follower of the show or this is your first time hearing what I have to say. Next week's episode is part 2 of this 2-part series on how to win friends and influence people, and I'll end now with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, who said, "Any fool can criticise, condemn, and complain, and most fools do." Now take control of your own destiny. Keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you can hear right now is Adventures by Himitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. You can follow my personal accounts on Twitter and Instagram, they're both the same, at fight_director, or follow the show on Twitter at FilmProProdPod, or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. Please continue to support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.